Have you ever heard the story of how 850,000 Bitcoin just vanished? It's one of the most infamous tales in the history of cryptocurrency, a story that almost brought the entire industry to its knees. This is the story of MT Gox, the exchange that went from the top of the world to absolute zero, and in doing so, changed crypto forever. To really get what happened, we need to rewind the clock. Way back in 2006, a programmer named Jed McCaleb started a website for fans of the card game Magic the Gathering Online. He called it MT Gox, which stood for Magic the Gathering Online Exchange. For a few years, that's all it was, a place for gamers to trade virtual cards. But in 2010, McCaleb discovered something new and exciting: Bitcoin. He saw its potential and decided to pivot his little trading site into a Bitcoin exchange. In 2011, he sold it to a French developer living in Japan named Mark Karpeles, and that's when things really took off. Under Karpeles, MT Gox grew at a mind-boggling speed. Bitcoin was still a niche geeky interest, but it was gaining traction. And for anyone who wanted to buy or sell it, MT Gox was pretty much the only game in town. By 2013, it was a giant at its peak. It was handling somewhere between 70 and 80% of all Bitcoin transactions in the world. If you were into Bitcoin, you were probably using MT Gox. It was the face of the crypto revolution, the gateway for thousands of early adopters. But behind this incredible success story, the cracks were already starting to show. Think of it like this. Imagine a tiny local coffee shop suddenly becoming a global franchise overnight. The owner is still using the same small cash register and the same single espresso machine, but now there are thousands of people lining up outside the door every single day. That was MT Gox. The exchange was built on outdated, clunky code, essentially the digital equivalent of duct tape and string. Mark Karpeles, while a skilled programmer, was reportedly overwhelmed and running the entire multi-million-dollar operation with a very small, inexperienced team. Stories from former employees paint a picture of chaos. The accounting was a mess, with a single shared spreadsheet used to track vast sums of money. Security was surprisingly lax for a company handling so much value. The entire infrastructure was creaking under the pressure of its own explosive growth. It was a classic case of scaling up way too fast, without building the solid foundation needed to support it. The market saw a booming empire, but internally, it was a house of cards waiting for a gust of wind. And that wind started blowing in 2013. The exchange began experiencing major issues. Withdrawals were frequently delayed for weeks, sometimes months. Users trying to get their money or their Bitcoin out of the exchange were met with error messages and radio silence from customer support. The official explanations were vague, blaming technical glitches and issues with banking partners. The crypto community grew anxious. People started asking tough questions. Where was the money? Why couldn't they access their own funds? The excuses from MT Gox just didn't add up, and a sense of dread began to creep in. Then, in February 2014, the house of cards collapsed. On February 7th, MT Gox abruptly halted all Bitcoin withdrawals. The panic intensified. A few weeks later, the website went completely offline, replaced by a blank page. The CEO, Mark Karpeles, resigned from the Bitcoin Foundation. The company's office in Tokyo was empty. And then, the bombshell dropped. In a leaked internal document, the horrifying truth was revealed. Mt. Gox had lost 850,000 Bitcoin. At the time, that was worth nearly $500 million. Today, it would be worth tens of billions. 750,000 of those coins belonged to its customers, and 100,000 belonged to the company itself. They were just gone. The company filed for bankruptcy protection, and the largest Bitcoin exchange in the world ceased to exist. So, how does a company lose 850,000 Bitcoin? The investigation revealed a nightmare scenario. It wasn't a single, dramatic hack. It was something far more insidious. For years, hackers had been exploiting a technical flaw in the Bitcoin protocol known as transaction malleability. It's a bit technical, but essentially, it allowed them to alter transaction IDs and trick the MT Gox system into thinking a withdrawal hadn't gone through, letting them withdraw the same funds multiple times. It was like a slow, silent bleed, a small, almost unnoticeable theft, happening over and over and over again, for years, because of the company's poor accounting and shoddy internal controls. Nobody noticed the growing hole in their digital vault. The very code that ran the exchange was vulnerable, and it had been systematically drained without anyone realizing the scale of the disaster until it was far too late. It turned out the withdrawal delays people experienced weren't just technical glitches. They were symptoms of an exchange that was already insolvent, desperately trying to stay afloat while its reserves were being siphoned away. Later, about 200,000 of the missing Bitcoin were found in an old, forgotten digital wallet. But the vast majority, over 650,000 coins, were never recovered. The fallout was catastrophic. The price of Bitcoin plummeted by over 30%. Many people who had trusted MT Gox with their life savings lost everything. The mainstream media declared Bitcoin dead, calling it a failed experiment, a playground for criminals and hackers. The collapse seemed to confirm everyone's worst fears about this new, unregulated world of digital money. For the nascent crypto industry, it was a moment of reckoning. But this disaster, as devastating as it was, also served as a crucial wake-up call. It was the event that forced the entire crypto ecosystem to grow up. The failure of MT Gox wasn't a failure of Bitcoin itself. It was a failure of a single poorly run company. It brutally exposed the dangers of centralization and the absolute necessity of robust security and transparent governance. In the aftermath, the industry was forced to confront some hard truths. You could just build a cool website and expect to handle hundreds of millions of dollars without enterprise-grade security. The idea of custody, how and where digital assets are stored and protected, became a central focus. New exchanges and crypto companies learned from MT Gox's mistakes. They began investing heavily in what are now standard practices, things like cold storage, which means keeping the vast majority of funds offline, away from potential hackers. They implemented multi-signature wallets, requiring multiple approvals for any large transaction, and they started conducting regular, independent security audits. Compliance and regulation, once seen as dirty words by some early crypto idealists, became recognized as essential for building trust and attracting mainstream adoption. The MT Gox saga pushed organizations to develop stronger legal and operational frameworks to protect their users. It was a painful, expensive lesson, but one that was desperately needed. The industry had to prove it could be trusted, that it could safeguard people's assets responsibly. The collapse effectively raised the bar for everyone. The flimsy amateur-hour exchanges were weeded out, and a new generation of more professional, secure, and resilient platforms began to emerge. So, when we look back at the MT Gox collapse, it's easy to see it as just a story of failure and loss, and it was. But it was also a turning point. It was the trial by fire that forged a stronger, more mature cryptocurrency industry. It taught us that scale without security is a recipe for disaster, and that trust, once lost, is incredibly hard to win back. The ghosts of MT Gox still haunt the crypto world, serving as a constant reminder of what can go wrong when vigilance fails. And in a strange way, we have its epic failure to thank for many of the safeguards and best practices that protect crypto investors today. What do you think? Were you around in the crypto space back then? Let me know your thoughts on the MT Gox legacy in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you found this deep dive interesting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the wild history of crypto. See you in the next one.